Hello everybody. I apologize in advance for making this video. This video is a little different in that we're going to be going over a deck that is toxic. And, well, I've done some decks that are kind of rude in the past, but this one is truly a solitaire deck, and you spend like 5 minutes on your turn just playing cards while the opponent has to kind of sit there and do nothing. And so you'll see what I mean pretty quickly, but if this deck ends up all over ranked, well, sorry in advance. Anyway, I will give big credit to Trino Core. He pioneered this deck, and so on the test server, he was running a lot of this deck, and there was a big discussion on whether it should be nerfed or not. I do think that there are some merits to this deck. It may not be fun to play against, but to play it is really fun, actually. It's really thinky, and there's a lot of choices here that are a little subtle, but kind of important. And so one of those choices is your first few turns, you're often conserving your resources. You're not playing cards. And the reason is you don't want to run out of cards in the end of the game and not be able to buff the attack of your allies. And that's why, even if you can play them, sometimes you don't play Contemplate. Or you don't play, one of your draw cards just to draw a card. So here, we're going to use a card called Accelerate that's going to put the top two cards of our deck on top of a resource pile, but it also gives our opponent the chance to do the exact same thing. So what I like doing is I like waiting until turn 4 to do Accelerate and then mimic the Accelerate so that the opponent has less time that they're able to utilize these resources to counterattack us with. And in this game, it looks like my opponent just doesn't have any cards. So that's also why I chose not to play Bad Santa, not giving my opponent cards. And also, I already was going second. And going second, you tend to have more cards in your hand. Especially when you play cards like Contemplate, you're constantly picking what you need. And early game, you want to see those accelerates because that's just going to make your life easier. I don't think it's necessary strictly, but it's really nice to have, like 10 resources or more when you're playing this deck. So that's why we're just playing Accelerate here. We're just trying to build up our resources before we go crazy. So another thing I'm keeping in mind is I'm not using Will to Fight because I noticed that some of them were sacrificed with Accelerate. So I'm trying to purposely not do that. Here, I probably should have... yeah, I think this was okay. I'm using Accelerate again here. Um, and we're just gonna go to 13 resources, and that's just gonna be nice to have. Like, I think you don't have to go this excessive, and it's actually almost gonna make me lose the game by going this far deep into my resources, because one of the tricky things about this deck that makes it so challenging is the fact that you're debating between you're using your cards because every ability you play buffs the Subjugated Wisp. Wisp gets an attack for every 2-cost ability or higher you play. So you want to be playing your abilities, not sacrificing all of them, because if you sacrifice too many, then you're not going to have enough abilities to play to buff up the attack of the Wisp. And so by now, you may have guessed what the purpose of this deck is. Well, that is to play a bunch of abilities with Subjugated Wisp, giving the Subjugated Wisp a ton of attack. You can see already, we're already on 10 attack here, and we're going to buff it up even further. Urgent Business, just drawing us a card, literally a card you probably wouldn't play otherwise, except for trying to buff up the attack. And so now, the final piece of the combo is Will to Fight. That's going to give us the final piece of attack to actually take that game down. So I think that's a good demonstration of how the deck plays, and obviously my opponent just kind of sat there while we played our whole game by ourselves, basically. And so that's why I consider this a pretty rude deck. Now, let me show you one more game. And then, okay, well, this is also against Jericho, but it really doesn't matter what your opponent is playing because you're a solitaire deck. You're not really, I mean, outside of making sure that your opponent is not dealing damage to you, that's gonna, outpace your ability to play and making sure that your opponent, isn't playing like traps is a big weakness to this deck. So making sure your opponent isn't playing counters. You really don't care what your opponent does, and so that's why I don't think it matters what type of heroes we're seeing. Now, the reason I want to show this replay is because it's a little bit older. I'm showing off one of my older builds that I liked but ended up not using for the final one that I'm going to show you guys because I think it's a little worse consistency-wise. But another idea here is using this thoughtful investment as a way to increase our resources without giving our opponent resources, which is very helpful because if you give your opponent resources, that's going to be really dangerous when it comes down to them being able to get that advantage from you playing all those resources and then killing you faster. So that's kind of the reasoning there of thoughtful investment. Here we're just going to go ahead and accelerate again, and then go ahead and Bad Santa. I might wait a turn. I don't remember what I did. So I did Bad Santa here. I think that is the right play to just get some draw. And then it's okay to like pass there, I think, because my opponent is nowhere close to killing me. And that's one of the things I had to learn with this deck. You want to really know when you're going to go for it, that you're pretty certain you're going to be able to go for it and win. You don't want to go for it and fail. And that happened to me a lot of times. I would go for a win and I wouldn't have it. And I would just waste all my resources and lose. So you really want to be very certain that you're going to win, and it's okay to pass and just use your health as a way to just soak damage. I mean, as long as you're not at 0 health, you haven't lost the game. You can be on 1 health left and still win. So definitely use your health as a resource. Don't be afraid to take big hits early on if it means that you can be more sure that you're actually going to win. But here, you can see the idea here. It's a combination of draw cards, feedback, and then just abilities in general. So, yeah, we're using this again. And one thing that I learned as well after playing a lot of this deck is Mimic is really, really powerful because it actually counts as 2 attack buffs for your Wisp. So that's why I really like saving the Mimics if possible. So that's another thing you can consider. And then, yeah, I guess just in general, it's hard to really describe things, but I guess, so in this situation, we're on 3 resources left. That's when you start, like, picking up on things like, okay, maybe we should not use Accelerate because we don't have a lot of cards left in the deck. And so you do want to be very careful of not over-accelerating. And then here I just accelerate because it's just going to be 1 extra damage on all of the Wisps. But this is already enough to win the game. So, yeah. And as you can see, it's not like we're crazy or anything. It is a 1-turn kill, but it's not excessive. It's about exactly enough to kill. So you can see that resources definitely becomes a problem if you don't manage your abilities very well. And that's why early in the game, you just don't want to be playing your abilities. You want to be holding on to them so that you can burn through them. I tried going over 40 cards with this deck for that reason, but I found that it's just not consistent enough because this is such a combo heavy deck. You have like 4 combo pieces you need, right? You need your accelerates, you need your mimics to you do want the mimics, but I guess the feedback is the second key piece. You need to see your Subjugated Wisp, you need to see your Will to Fight, and you need to see those 4 cards, otherwise you lose the game. So it's like a 4-card combo, and then the 5th card would just be draw cards, which we run a ton of draw cards, but any kind of combination of draw cards is necessary. And so you run those 5 things, and so I would call it like a 5-card combo that you keep having to repeat because you have to keep playing the feedback to renew your resources again and again. And so that's what makes this deck really hard to play. I would say this takes, quite a lot of skill to pilot well. And so if you're up for like a really challenging combo deck, then this is something you might want to try. So here's the deck list. We run 4 Wisps. Now, I think you need to run 4 Wisp. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that, people are going to be running traps sometimes, and so you can't always rely on the first wisp to live. And so you want to have extras anyway. But yeah, if you only run 3 or 2, you might not draw into it, and you're going to increase your chances of sacrificing it and not having extra copies after you accelerate. So this is a necessary 4 of, even though it might brick us when we just don't get into our other pieces of the combo. You do generally need at least 2 wisps to win the game. I think it would be very, very hard, with this deck list at least, to have only 1 wisp and still win. So do keep that in mind. Next, we have run 1 Urgent Business. This is just for the fact that it draws a card when it's summoned. That's literally the only reason I'm running it. And I'm only running 1 because it bricks if you run multiple. You already have an Urgent Business out, you can't play another one. So that's why we're only playing 1 Urgent Business. The effect does not matter at all. I mean, I guess it's nice that the opponent can't attack, but, you know, we don't really care about that much. Bad Santa, this is a key card of the deck. You have to run 4, just drawing 3 cards, very solid. We're running 1 Meltdown, and I'll get back to this later. 3 Spontaneous Growth. This is a nice card because it not only draws a card, but also gives your Wisp 1 attack. So it basically overall gives the Wisp 2 attack, which is pretty big, actually. So this is a nice card to run. Contemplate is another very solid card in this deck. And at first I was like, I didn't use this to the best of my ability. I think that this is actually one of the better cards in the deck, competing with Bad Santa. Because of the combo nature of this deck, almost this, I would almost prefer this. In fact, I kind of do prefer Contemplate over Rest for the Weary, which draws 2 cards. It's like better to see 3 cards and put back 2 than to just draw 2 cards, because that one key card can get you so much further than just seeing 2 cards that might not be the cards you need. So Contemplate is extremely solid in this deck, another necessary 4 of, I think. 4 Feedback, another necessary 4 of. This is one of our key pieces, and we're going to use this again and again to renew our resources and keep our combo going. So yeah, we get to 11 resources, 9 and above resources is probably where I want to be, and then I think you're good to maybe launch your combo. 9, I mean, so the tricky thing is, like, sometimes you don't have, like, your opponent is about to win on the next turn, so you have to launch the combo sooner than you would like. But yeah, so that's why you can't always afford to wait until you have like 12 resources or something. So do keep that in mind when playing this deck as well. And yeah. Okay, anyway, Mimic is a necessary 4 of. The nice thing about this is when you cast it, it buffs Wisp by 1, and then when you grab another ability from the grave using the Mimic effect, it buffs the Wisp another 1. So it's basically buffing 2, and it's so flexible because it gets you your feedback, it gets you your accelerate, it gets you anything you need, really. Will to Fight is an incredibly good, okay, well, it's like the last piece of the combo here, or one of the 5 pieces of the combo. You need this card as a 4 of, in my opinion, because otherwise you might sacrifice it accidentally with Accelerate, and so on. But this basically gives your Wisp haste, and, you know, if you summon your Wisp, your opponent is just going to kill it because they know what you're up to, probably, and, you know, they're not going to let that Wisp live. So that's why it's so necessary to win on the same turn that you summon the Wisp. And so that's where Will to Fight comes very handy. Accelerate, this is one of the key pieces of our combo, just giving us more resources there. 4 Rest for the Weary, this is just draw 2 for a 3 cost. Pretty good. You just have to be wary of players playing location decks. That's gonna kind of mean that you have to use the other effect, and you're not able to use this for draw. So do keep that in mind. Against location decks, it might be a little weaker. Finally, we are only running 2 items, and so if you saw the last replay, I was running Thoughtful Investment and some other items. This is all I want to run: 1 Loom of Fate and 1 Unstable Gateway. Now, my reasoning is that I like Unstable Gateway because this is a card that you can play on turn 3 instead of just doing nothing, because then you can seek out the Wisp. And I think it just adds some consistency that's really nice. And even if you draw it into your combo, it's still useful to grab a Wisp out of the deck so that it's not going to get accelerated away. And just to get like another card in the hand, it's kind of nice actually. So I was very happy about Unstable Gateway. And for the same reason, I kind of like Loom of Fate. I think it's nice to play it early, like on turn 2 or turn 3. And then later on like, on a later turn, this card does pay dividends because it lets you keep drawing cards. So you can see more cards and hopefully draw into your combo, set it up, and it just helps you early game. Now, the reason I'm only running one of each is because you don't want to run multiples. And what I found when I was running multiples is that I would draw it and I would already have it on board. And I tried to fix that problem by running Meltdown. But, with such a combo heavy deck, you need to be running 40 cards and you need to be making sure that you're never bricking. Like, it's so important that if you're going to top deck a card, the chances that you brick are low. Because I will say that there are situations where you like try to extend into your combo. You're like, you summoned 15 abilities that turn. And now your hand is like one card, and it's like maybe the last card in your hand is like a Contemplate or something. You need to see the feedback, or you need to see like the bad Santa, or you need to see like that one specific card. And so that's why, I don't know, it's just running multiples, it's just bricks too much. At least as a one of, if you draw it mid combo, you can always play it and use it. So it's fine to draw it mid combo, and that's why I think they're great as one ofs. Another one you could consider is Thoughtful Investment. I will also know that there are. I mean, I don't see Braxnorian Soldier that much anymore, but if you see that, you can run Shocking Grasp, or any kind of allies that have abilities. You can maybe run like Transposer is one that I've seen. So yeah, those are some options for you. In terms of other techs, I think the biggest problem this deck has is probably traps. So I don't know, maybe like uh, it's just tough because I don't know if it would even be worth it because it would just brick you more than anything else. But you could run Widespread Decay. This would probably be the best way to handle it if you were seeing a lot of traps. Because otherwise, you just can't win through a trap. Like, even a snare trap, really messes with this deck. So, I think every time I ran into a player who was playing traps, I lost. So there was basically nothing I could do other than hope that my opponent didn't draw enough traps. But yeah, that is something to keep in mind. So in terms of the win rate, okay, it's not fantastic. But again, for some of my early plays, I was getting used to the deck still. And that's going to be a thing. I think this is a very skill-based deck. It's very hard to play. And for that reason, you might not win a ton right off the bat. And so, yeah, I lost to a lot of hunters. I had a pretty good streak in the middle there. And I had some losses early on, especially here where I was still learning the deck. Went on a little streak and then lost a bunch and started picking back up. And then, yeah, I think the final deck list I have, I'm pretty happy with. In terms of this deck, yeah, I just also want to say that, I think this deck is nice for the novelty. I think it's a good challenge, but I would say that unless you really enjoy this playstyle, this is probably not the deck you want to be running all the time because you'll get tired of it. And I will say that after playing this many games with it, I'm kind of over this deck. I feel like I've, exhausted it. I'm sure I can still get better at it and play more and like push it further, but yeah, I don't know. I think that it's not the most fun deck because you lose that interaction that makes Shadow Era really fun. It's like responding to what your opponent's doing, and I guess you get to do that, but your opponent doesn't as much. And so, yeah, I don't know. I will caution this deck in particular, where this is not your normal Shadow Era deck, and I'm not necessarily saying go play this deck. In fact, if anything, I would say maybe don't play this deck because it's not as fun as maybe some other decks. It's very specifically if you enjoy combo decks and you want a challenge, then I would say you should try out this deck. Anyway, I've rambled on for long enough. Um, yeah, okay, actually, what I will do is I'll just talk a little bit about some trivia. So it used to not actually activate when it was a cost 2 or greater ability. That was a nerf. It used to just, whenever you played an ability, it would gain 1 attack. And actually, the reason it had that is because the ability was kind of plain and um, I don't know, it was just kind of added at the last minute, actually. And so what's kind of funny is it ended up being like a really relevant ability. But anyway, I do think that, you know, it's tough because I don't think it needs a nerf. I think that it's just whenever you lose to it, it's just going to feel really, really bad. So I'm not going to be surprised if people start calling for a nerf of this card. Um, but it is, like when you win with it, it's great, but you do like you'll just have losses that are really like you played accelerate and like it sacrifice 2 of your wisps and you have no wisps in your hand, and then you draw through your whole deck and your wisps are on the bottom of the deck. Like that will happen to you, and like you can't do anything about that. Like you just lose. So, um, I that's why I don't think it's a broken deck. Like you'll just lose to yourself. What I do think though is if you're playing against this, that's kind of like you're just sitting there. So you do have to balance not just how good is the card itself, but also, is this good for the game? And this is, if I'm being honest, probably not great for the game. I do think that it's a fun deck, and so as long as it doesn't get crazy, I mean, if someone breaks it or something, even further, then yeah, that will definitely have to be changed. But in its current state, I think it might be an acceptable thing to have like this one combo deck that does have that weakness of traps that can stop it pretty well. Okay, yeah, I've definitely rambled for long enough, so do let me know what you think about this deck. Have you seen this before? Is this something that you are worried about? Is this something that you think should be changed? Yeah, let me know in the comments below, and thanks for watching.